Believe it or not, my wife spent 2 years slowly poisoning my cat Felix and me along with him. When I finally uncovered the truth, I made the only possible choice. Now she sits in prison for attempted murder. This isn't just a story, it's a confession whispered into the dark. If you leave your mark or comment, I'll like it shows the Redditor-X-Tales family you were really here listening. And when you subscribe and tap the bell, you're not just supporting this channel, you're helping this story find someone who truly needs it. We at Redditor-X-Tales are grateful you're here. My name is Michael. I'm 35 years old and work as an architect at a construction firm here in Chicago. I have a Maine Coon cat named Felix, a massive fiery red beauty with tufted ears and the temperament of a king. I adopted him as a kitten 4 years ago, back when I was still single and living in a small apartment on the north side. Felix became more than just a pet, he was my best friend, my late-night companion while I worked over drawings, my alarm clock in the mornings, the one living soul who was always genuinely happy to see me. 2 years ago, I married Eva Harrison. We met at a cafe near the hospital where she worked as a pediatrician. Eva was different. Tall, slim, with piercing blue eyes and a smile that nearly made my knees buckle. She seemed perfect, smart, successful, caring. She told me she loved animals, and on our second date she even brought a toy for Felix. At first, everything felt like a fairy tale. We moved into a spacious house in Evanston, the one I had designed and built specifically for my future family. Felix had his own room with a climbing tree and toys, while Eva had a home office for her paperwork. We talked about kids, built plans for the future, and I truly believed I had finally found happiness. But only a few months after the wedding, things started to feel off. It began with small things. Felix, who had always been perfectly behaved, suddenly turned vindictive. One day I found a surprise in Eva's expensive Jimmy Choo heels bought just for an important corporate event at the hospital. The stench was unbearable, and the shoes had to be thrown away. Eva was furious, waving the ruined shoes and accusing Felix of doing it on purpose. She insisted his look showed pride in what he'd done. I looked into Felix's amber eyes. There really was something satisfied in his gaze. But that's impossible. Cats don't plot revenge, do they? I tried to explain that he was just adjusting to the changes in new home, new environment, and new person in the house. Cats are territorial. They need time. But the incidents escalated. A week later, Felix defiled her expensive Coach bag. Then her favorite cashmere throw. Always Eva's belongings, never mine. Eva raged, demanding I send Felix to a shelter or at least lock him in the basement. I refused, again and again. I told her he was just jealous, defending his space. She left coldly, insisting the cat had declared war on her. Every day brought new destruction. Yesterday her favorite face, the day before torn up papers. I started to worry. In all 4 years, Felix had never behaved like this. Maybe he needed to see a vet. My best friend David Miller is a veterinarian at a clinic on Michigan Avenue. We had known each other since our days at the University of Illinois, and I trusted him completely. When I took Felix in, David listened carefully to my story. He explained that sudden behavioral changes in animals always have a cause of stress, illness, hormonal imbalance, or environmental factors. New smells, new foods, and familiar people. Cats are sensitive to change. Then he asked a question that struck me. How does Eva treat Felix when I'm not home? That question unsettled me. Honestly, I had never really thought about it. I was contented 12 hours a day, especially during big projects. What happened at home in my absence? I had no idea. I told him Eve often complained that Felix ignored her, hiding the entire time I was gone, only reappearing when I returned. David frowned, checked Felix's appetite, and asked more questions. Admitted the cat had become picky lately, turning away from foods he once devoured. David murmured a thoughtful, interesting, took a blood sample, and promised a full workup. Results in 3 days. In the meantime, he told me to keep a closer eye on Felix and, oddly, suggested I try coming home unexpectedly now and then. He apologized, calling it professional paranoia. On the drive back, I turned his words over in my mind. Unexpected returns. Why would my wife hide anything from me? We were family. We trusted each other. But the doubt lodged inside me like a splinter I couldn't pull out. That evening, the house was unusually silent. I tried small talk. Eva barely looked up from her book, muttered something vague about her day, then quickly asked why I'd been gone so long. Her tone carried a sharp edge. My shoulders tightened without me realizing. When I mentioned the full blood work, her eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite name worry, maybe even fear. I let Felix roam, then stepped out to greet a neighbor just back from vacation. When I returned half an hour later, I found my cat hiding on a shelf in the pantry, pressed between cans. He looked at me with wide, knowing eyes, rubbing his head into my palm. Everything seemed normal, no aggression, no odd behavior. I whispered to him, asking what was wrong, why he was acting this way. His response was a long, mournful meow. It sounded like a plea, as if he were desperately trying to tell me something I couldn't understand. For the first time in years, I felt he was truly asking for help. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to Eva's breathing beside me. It was steady, but somehow rehearsed. Every sound in the darkness made me tend to the creak of the floorboards, the rustle of Felix moving somewhere in the house, even the pounding of my own heart in my ears. And I didn't yet know that soon I would learn a truth that would shatter everything I believed about my marriage and about the woman lying next to me. The next day, I decided to follow David's advice and came home early. At the office, I claimed I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't far from the truth. For months I'd been plagued by constant fatigue, headaches, and morning nausea. I blamed it on stress from work and the tension at home with Felix. But now those symptoms carried a darker meaning. I parked a block away and quietly approached the front door. My hands trembled as I turned the key. A heavy sense of dread spread through my chest, as if I stood at the threshold of a revelation that would change my life forever. Voices drifted from the kitchen. Eva was on the phone with someone. Her tone was low, irritated, and the words I caught froze the blood in my veins. She complained that things were moving too slowly. The cat should have been dead already, but he was still alive. And with me, Michael, the process wasn't going as fast as planned either. My name, from her lips, sounded like a sentence. Then she said she couldn't increase the dose, it would be too noticeable. Another week or two, and they could move on to the next stage. The most important thing was that no one suspected anything. I staggered back toward the door, heart pounding so hard it felt deafening. My knees buckled, my mouth went dry. What next stage? What dose? Cold sweat broke across my forehead as the horror of her words sank in. I ran outside, collapsed into the car, and tried to steady my thoughts. My hands shook so badly I couldn't start the engine. Maybe I'd misunderstood? Maybe she was discussing a medical case with a colleague. After all, she's a doctor with many patients. But no matter how I tried to explain it away, a worm of doubt gnawed at me relentlessly. Half an hour later, I returned officially. Eva greeted me with her usual mask of the caring wife, a kiss on the cheek, questions about work, complaints about her long day at the hospital. Nothing in her demeanor betrayed the sinister conversation I'd overheard. Every smile felt staged, every gesture false. When I casually asked about Felix, she brushed it off with indifference. The cat was hiding somewhere, as always. Then she brought up, once again, the idea of giving him away to a friend who loved cats. This time her voice carried subtle insistence I hadn't noticed before. I refused outright. She sighed, said nothing more, but I felt her eyes on me heavy, probing as I went to look for Felix. I found him in the bathroom, lying on the cold tile, breathing heavily. Strange, since he usually sought out warm spots. When I lifted him, he felt weak, lifeless. I whispered, asking what was wrong. Felix let out a faint, pleading meow and looked at me with eyes that seemed to beg for help. A shocking thought hit me. What if he really was begging? What if all those messes he'd made with Eva's things were desperate attempts to warn me? I examined him closely. His fur was dull, his nose hot, his eyes inflamed. When I offered his favorite treat, a piece of boiled chicken, he turned away. I called Eva in to see him. Her reaction sealed my suspicions. She glanced at Felix with disinterest, shrugged, and casually suggested he'd picked up an infection somewhere. Her voice was cold, almost mocking. And then she said he should be left alone and that animals heal themselves. Coming from a doctor, it sounded like cruelty. That night's sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, trying to piece everything together: the overheard phone call, our indifference toward Felix, my own strange health problems. The puzzle was forming, but it was too monstrous to accept. Beside me, Eva breathed steadily, but to me it sounded predatory, patient. Each exhale throbbed in my temples like a warning. In the morning, once she left for work, I began my own investigation. I started in the kitchen, at Felix's bowls. The food looked normal, but when I leaned closer, there was a faint chemical odor. I scooped some into a plastic bag for David to test. Then I searched her home office. In a drawer under a stack of medical journals, I found a blister pack labeled bisacodyl laxative. Next to it was another package, one I didn't recognize, thallium sulfate. A quick search online made my blood run cold. Thallium sulfate, a powerful poison. In small doses, it causes gradual health decline, in higher ones, death. Symptoms: weakness, nausea, hair loss, nervous system damage. My hair had been falling out. I blamed stress. Hands trembling, I photographed the packages and carefully put them back. My wife was trying to kill me. And Felix. The thought hit me so hard I grabbed the desk for balance. My ears rang, black spots clouded my vision. But why? For what? Still shaking, I opened her laptop. The browser was open to her email. In drafts, a message she hadn't yet sent waited. It was addressed to someone named Robert. And what I read chilled me even more. Eva wrote that it was time to move to active measures. M is getting suspicious. Yesterday he asked strange questions. If we move too slowly, the plan could fail. She suggested speeding things up and by the end of the month gaining access to my bank accounts. After that, they could stage an accident. Robert, Eva's father. Robert Harrison. Wealthy businessman, owner of a chain of medical centers. I'd always felt he disliked me. Now I knew why. They were planning to kill me. For money. The house I built was worth $1.05 million. Life insurance, another $2 million. My savings. In total, about $5 million. A nice payday. The next day, I called in sick and took Felix to David along with a sample of his food. My friend saw me and immediately ushered us in. I must have looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. At the clinic, David examined Felix carefully. My proud, independent cat lay limp on the table, not even trying to resist. That was the most terrifying sign. He had become a shadow of himself. An hour later, David returned from the lab with a grim face. His eyes carried both sympathy and anger. The blood work showed high levels of bisacodyl in Felix's system, and in his food traces of thallium. David sat in silence for a long time, staring at the papers. Then he lifted his gaze and told me someone was systematically poisoning my cat. A little longer, and Felix would have died of kidney failure. The room spun around me. My hands shook so badly I shoved them into my pockets to hide it. David insisted I run tests too. The symptoms I described matched chronic thallium poisoning. The results confirmed my worst fears. The level of toxin in my blood was at the threshold. Another month or two of this slow poisoning, and I'd have ended up in the hospital with a vague unknown illness. And I would never have walked out alive. David urged me to go to the police immediately. But I knew lab results weren't enough. Who would believe that a respected pediatrician was poisoning her husband for money, especially when her father was a powerful businessman with deep connections? I asked David to keep Felix for treatment and detox. At home, I told Eva the cat was seriously ill and had to stay at the clinic. She reacted with the indifference of someone hearing about a broken appliance. Not once did she ask what was wrong. The next few days, I lived on a knife's edge. I knew Eva was poisoning me, but had no proof. I stopped eating at home, bought coffee on the way to work. She didn't protest, even suggested I see a gastroenterologist. But I caught her watching me, studying me, trying to figure out why her plan wasn't working. There was something predatory in her eyes now. On the fourth evening, she came home later than usual, claiming an emergency surgery had kept her at the hospital. But I saw the nervous flicker in her hands as she set her bag down, heard her voice pitch just a little too high. That night I pretended to sleep. I listened as she slipped out of bed and padded down the hall. Pots clinked, something rustled. 10 minutes later she returned and stood by the bed for a long time. I could feel her eyes on me, even with mine shut. In the morning, she was unusually affectionate, made my favorite omelette, brewed coffee, even kissed my forehead, something she hadn't done in months. It was so forced that goosebumps broke out across my arms. I told her I wasn't hungry and left for work. That evening, I found the untouched breakfast still on the table. Eva's concern sounded strained, almost irritated. And then I realized she had increased the dose. She'd expected today's meal to be my last. The next day, I made a desperate move. I called our neighbor, Sarah Collins. We only exchanged pleasantries before, but she was a nurse at the same hospital as Eva, just in another department. We met at a cafe near the hospital. Sarah looked worried. I must have sounded awful on the phone. I laid out my suspicions. She sat in silence for a long time before speaking. She admitted she had noticed odd things. Frequent tense phone calls from Eva's father. Once she'd seen Eva dumping something in the trash late at night. When asked, Eva brushed it off as expired medication. But why toss it in a public dumpster instead of a proper disposal site? Then Sarah told me something that chilled my blood. Just last week, she overheard Eva in a hospital corridor saying, "The patient isn't responding to treatment as expected. We need to adjust to therapy." Sarah had assumed it was about a complicated case. But after hearing my story, she began to realize who that patient really was. I begged Sarah to help me. She agreed without hesitation. We arranged for her to watch Eva at the hospital and report anything suspicious. Meanwhile, I ordered hidden cameras online, small, discreet ones I could conceal in bookshelves or behind picture frames. But tell me, what would you do, knowing the person sleeping beside you each night was plotting your death? 2 days later, I installed the cameras in the kitchen, living room, and Eva's home office. I paid special attention to the coffee maker and the drawer where she kept her vitamins. That same day, David called with good news. Felix was improving. The detox was working, his labs were better, and he had started eating and even purring again. But it was still too dangerous to bring him home. I lied to Eva, saying Felix's condition had worsened and the vet wasn't sure he'd survive. She received the news with no emotion. She didn't even offer to visit or ask how she could help. A doctor, yet no sense of compassion for a suffering creature. That evening, Eva had a long phone call with her father. I caught fragments, talk of deadlines, risks, and the need to speed things up. Afterward, she was visibly agitated. That night, she rose again. This time, I followed quietly. From the crack of the kitchen door, I watched as she stood by the coffee maker, a small vial in her hand. She opened the water reservoir and poured the contents in, then stirred with a spoon. In the morning, she was waiting with a surprise. Fresh coffee brewed, a smile plastered on her face. A smile that carried nothing human, only cold anticipation. I lifted the cup, raised it to my lips, and poured it into the sink. I muttered it was too hot. For a second, fury twisted her face before she regained her composure. All day she called my office, pressing to meet for lunch. Her voice carried mounting anxiety. That evening, I got the shock of my life. Eva came home with her father, Robert Harrison. Tall, silver-haired, cold grey eyes, commanding presence. He rarely visited, and his appearance never meant anything good. At dinner, Robert was polite, but I felt his gaze dissecting me, as if measuring how close I was to breaking. He asked about my work, my health, even offered a checkup at his private clinic with the best doctors, the finest equipment. I declined politely. But I saw the look that passed between father and daughter. Disappointment. Resolve. When Robert left, Eva was unusually silent. She cleared the table, avoiding my eyes. And I knew the games were over. They were moving to more drastic measures. And I was right. That night, the hidden cameras captured something terrifying. Footage that seared itself into my memory forever. Proof that this was no longer a nightmare, it was reality. The footage showed everything. Eva, at 3 a.m, descending into the kitchen with a large syringe in her hand. Opening the coffee maker's reservoir and injecting a clear liquid. Stirring the water carefully with a wooden spoon. And then the most chilling part, standing by the window, dialing her father's number. There was no sound, but by the movement of her lips I could tell she was reporting that the job was done. Her face carried no hesitation, no regret. Only cold determination to see it through. But that wasn't all. The living room camera caught the nightmare continuing. After the call, Eva went into my home office. She methodically went through my papers, photographing insurance policies, bank statements, my will. My hand shook as I replayed the recording. Eva studied my will with the same look one might give a restaurant menu. Businesslike, detached. The woman I loved, the woman I trusted, was planning my death like a routine work task. In the morning, Eva greeted me with her usual fake smile. She offered me fresh coffee that was supposed to be my last. When I refused, I saw a flicker of irritation in her eyes. But she quickly masked it, suggesting we go to a doctor together, pretending she was concerned about my health. I knew then time was against me. Robert and Eva wouldn't wait much longer. If their soft methods failed, they would escalate. I copied the footage onto several drives and went straight to David. My friend was horrified. He said he'd only ever seen killers this cold-blooded in crime reports. Together we went to the police. Detective James Rodriguez listened to my story with a stone face. He studied the recordings, the blood work, the photos of the pills. He said it was enough for an arrest warrant, but warned me. We had to act quickly, carefully. If Eva realized she was exposed, she could run or destroy the evidence. We devised a plan. I had to act as if nothing had changed, as if I knew nothing. Meanwhile, the police would set up surveillance at our house and the hospital where she worked. When I returned home, Eva was in an unusually cheerful mood. She hummed while making dinner. On the kitchen table stood an open bottle of expensive wine, the very same we'd opened on our wedding day. She said she wanted a romantic evening, that we hadn't spent enough time together lately. Her voice carried a note of triumph, as if she were already celebrating victory. At dinner, she was overly attentive, talking about vacations, about lake house we might buy, about the children she wanted. Each word dripped with false cheer in triumph. She poured wine only for me. She herself drank mineral water, claiming a headache. I pretended to sip while secretly pouring it into a flower pot beside my chair. After dinner, she suggested we take a bath together like on our honeymoon. Her eyes glittered, but there was nothing human in that shine. Only predatory anticipation. I pled exhaustion and went to bed. She didn't press, but I felt her disappointment. Her plan had faltered again, and it infuriated her. That night she tossed and turned beside me. Several times she got up, stood at the window, lost in thought. At 4 a.m, she slipped downstairs. This time, I didn't follow, the cameras would catch it all. The next day, the recordings revealed something even worse. Eva hadn't just poisoned the coffee maker. She had laced my toothbrush, my towel, even the handle of my office door. She had turned my entire home into a death trap. Then she called her father again, speaking at length. By the movement of her lips, I understood deadlines. Robert's patience was running out. Their project needed to be finished within days. Realizing I had little time left, I called Detective Rodriguez. We arranged to meet in his office within an hour. I told Eva I was leaving early for work on an important project. She walked me to the door with a smile. Kissed me goodbye, wished me a good day. But the kiss felt like the cold slab of a tombstone. She was certain she'd never see me alive again. At the precinct, Rodriguez showed me the forensic results confirming the recordings were authentic. Clear evidence of attempted murder. Enough for a warrant. But there was more. Investigators had examined Robert Harrison's financials. The discovery was shocking. His business was on the brink of collapse in massive debts from failed investments. The life insurance payout for my death was meant to save his empire. So it wasn't just greed. Robert and Eve were fighting to preserve their way of life, and I was nothing more than a means to an end. An operation to arrest her was set for that evening. Eva would be taken when she returned home from work. But the plan fell apart. At 2 p.m, Sarah called me, her voice trembling. She'd seen Eva hurriedly packing things into her locker at the hospital, and overheard her on the phone saying, "We need to disappear now." My wife knew. Maybe she'd noticed the cameras. Maybe she simply sensed it. Either way, she was preparing to run. I immediately contacted Rodriguez. He dispatched officers to the hospital, but by the time they arrived, Eva was gone. Her colleagues said she'd left an hour earlier, citing a family emergency. Half an hour later, my phone rang. An unknown number. Eva's voice was calm, almost indifferent. She said she knew about the cameras, about the police, that I was making a huge mistake trying to stop her. Then she added something that froze my blood. Felix was still at the veterinary clinic, and it would be such a shame if something happened to him because of my stupidity. The threat knocked the wind out of me. I spurred through my stomach, my throat clenched tight. Every instinct screamed at me to rush to the clinic, but reason told me that's exactly what she wanted. What Eva underestimated was how much I had changed. Months of fighting for my life had hardened me. I was no longer the same man. Rodriguez doubled the surveillance at my home and at the vet's office, and I made a final, desperate choice. I agreed to meet Eva, to try and convince her to surrender. The meeting was set in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, a place where no one would hear the screams. I arrived at the warehouse ahead of time. Detective Rodriguez and his team were already in position in nearby buildings. A microphone was hidden under my shirt. Every word would be recorded. The abandoned warehouse looked like something out of a horror movie with shattered windows, rusted steel beams, piles of debris in the corners. The perfect place for a murder. Or for justice. Eva arrived right on time. Dressed in a black coat, hair pulled into a tight bun, a small bag in her hand. Her face carried none of the charm that had once captivated me. Only cold determination. She stopped a few meters away, studying my face as if to gauge how serious I was. Her eyes held no fear, no remorse. Only calculation. She began with accusations. She said I had destroyed a perfect family with my suspicion and paranoia. That she loved me and only wanted the best for both of us. Her words flowed smoothly, convincingly. If I hadn't seen the footage, I might have believed her. Then came the threats. She claimed she had criminal connections, people who could reach me anytime. If I didn't drop the accusations, my life would become hell. When I stood firm, she finally dropped the mask. She told the truth about how everything had been planned. How her father had chosen me as her husband because of my money. How they had studied my habits to find the perfect way to kill me. Even our meeting at the cafe hadn't been chance. Eva had picked that spot deliberately, knowing I often passed by after work. Our accidental encounter had been carefully staged. 2 years of marriage, 2 years of living as the perfect wife, waiting for the right moment to strike. Felix's presence only sped things up. The cat became the perfect test subject for their poison. When I asked if she had ever felt anything real from me, Eva laughed. A cold, ringing laugh. She said I had been a decent lover and a convenient partner. Nothing more. Money had always meant more to her than love. She described her future plans. After my death, she would endure a period of mourning. Then an introduction to a wealthy widower, one of her father's clients. Another marriage. Another accident a few years later. I wasn't the first. I wouldn't have been the last. Just the most profitable at the time. Listening to her, I didn't feel rage. I felt pity. Pity for a woman who had turned her life into one endless lie. Who had never known real love from her parents and couldn't give it to anyone else. She pulled a small pistol from her bag. She said her original plan had been to stage my suicide from despair, depression, financial troubles, the death of a beloved cat. A convincing story for a tragic end. The gun trembled in her hands, not from fear but excitement. She savored the moment of absolute control over my life. This was what she had lived for all those months. But Eva didn't know about the police snipers on the rooftops. Didn't know every word was being recorded. Didn't know her fate was already sealed. When she raised the gun, ready to fire, the warehouse erupted with shouts. Police dropped the weapon. Red laser dots danced across her chest. Eva's face twisted with rage. For a moment, I thought she might turn the gun on herself. But instinct won. The pistol clattered onto the concrete. She raised her hands. Even in defeat, her eyes held no remorse. Only fury at her failure. Robert Harrison was arrested at the same time in his office. Police uncovered correspondence with hired killers, plans for insurance fraud, lists of other potential victims. Father and daughter had indeed been planning to make murder their family business. The trial lasted 3 months. The evidence was overwhelming: the recordings, the blood tests, witness testimony, Eva's taped confession. She was sentenced to life without parole. Robert got 25 years. During sentencing, Eva glared at me with pure hatred. Not at the judge, not at the prosecutor, at me. As if I was the one who had ruined their perfect plan. To the very end, she couldn't comprehend the magnitude of what she'd done. I sat there thinking how close I had come to death. Another week, and no one would have ever known the truth. I'd have been buried as a victim of a mysterious illness, and Eva would be the grieving widow. Felix came home a month after her arrest. The detox worked. His tests were clean. My cat was once again the playful, mischievous creature I knew. And I finally realized he had tried to save me. Every mess he'd made with Eva's belongings had been a warning. Every plaintive male cry for help. Animals sense lies better than humans. Felix had known the truth all along. I sold the house. Too many ghosts in those walls. I bought a small cottage outside the city where Felix and I began a new life. Quiet. Honest. Free of poison breakfasts and false smiles. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I hadn't noticed Felix's strange behavior. If I had trusted Eva and drunk that coffee. My skin crawls at how thin a line had been between life and death. Sarah became a good friend. She visits often, brings treats for Felix. She says I look much healthier now. And she's right, the headaches, nausea, and weakness are gone. My body healed from the poison, my soul from the lies. David checks on Felix regularly. He's become even closer after all this. He was the first to believe me, the one who helped gather the proof. Without him, I wouldn't be here. Detective Rodriguez later told me our case helped uncover similar crimes. Apparently, slow poisoning happens more often than people think. Usually the victims don't survive to tell their story. A year has passed since Eva's arrest. I've learned to trust again, though it hasn't been easy. I'm seeing someone new, Olivia, a school teacher with kind eyes and a genuine smile. Felix approves that he goes up on her lap, brings her toys. Most importantly, I've learned the value of real relationships. Trust. Honesty. Respect. What I had with Eva wasn't love. It was a performance. A decoration hiding an empty stage. Real love doesn't plan your murder. It doesn't put money above your life. It doesn't turn your home into a killing ground. Sometimes, at night, I wake and listen to Felix breathing by my bed. Steady, calm, alive. I feel the warmth radiating from his body, the symbol of the new life we've built. And I know we both survived. We both got a second chance. Somewhere in a prison cell sits the woman who was once my wife. Does she think about what she did? Does she regret the choices that put her there? Or does she still rage at the fact her plan failed? I don't know. And I don't care. My story could have ended in a morgue. Instead, thanks to an orange cat named Felix, it became the beginning of a new life. A life without lies. Without fear. Without poison in my morning coffee. And if you feel that something is wrong in your relationship, listen to that feeling. Trust your intuition. Pay attention to the small things. Sometimes life depends on whether you notice a change in your cat's behavior or a chemical smell in the food. Above all, remember this: real love will never harm you. It will never plan your death. It will never turn your home into a place of execution. Protect yourself. Protect your loved ones. And listen to your pets, they may know more than you think. Hey. That's it, today's story comes to an end. And honestly, thank you from the heart of the Redditor-X-Tales family for staying with us until the very last word. We at Redditor-X-Tales love to know what you think really. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read them all. And trust me, your words mean more than you realize. If you're hungry for more, the full playlist is waiting in the description. And don't worry, new true stories are already on the way. The Redditor-X-Tales family can't wait to share them with you. If this journey touched you even a little, hit subscribe and tap the bell so you'll never miss the next story. Once again, thank you for listening. Until next time, take care.